Well, what do the troops think of our pending war with Iran? Are they pumped up and ready, willing to give their lives? Are they thinking this is an epic disaster? What gives with the lazy marching in the military parade this past weekend? Is that a manifestation of their low morale? Joining us now is Greg Stoker. Greg is a former United States Army Ranger with a background in special operations and human intelligence collection. He conducted 4 combat deployments to Afghanistan and is now a human rights activist and geopolitical analyst at Mint Press News, as well as the host of Colonial Outcasts on YouTube. Greg, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a crazy and going to be another crazy 48 hours.
Oh, yeah, it is. I really want to start off talking. I want to get into your thoughts on this war that we're about to be jumping ourselves into and whatnot, and get your analysis on it, and also your analysis on the warfare between Iran and Israel, because you're so great at that. But the first thing I want to ask you about is the morale of the troops, because we all saw this during the military parade, this kind of, I don't know what you want to, is this how troops march? I mean, I'm not, I'm no expert, but you tell me, is this how troops march in the U.S. military?
So about day 5 of basic training, you learn how to march better than that. They're not in step. There's no cadence. You usually go off the guy in the front left steps. And it's just, I don't know, a lot of people, there have been a lot of speculations. Like, was this a protest march? Was, I don't know. I haven't seen anything as sloppy as that. Like, even when I was in Ranger Regiment, we didn't do drill and ceremony at all, because we thought we were above it in the Special Operations Unit. But I've never been that bad at it. It was just completely bizarre. Of course, the entire parade was a flop. I was there covering it for Mint Press News. It was hot. It was sweaty. The morale was, I don't know, pretty low, even among the civilian population who showed up. It was a thoroughly unenjoyable experience, and the enthusiasm was completely dampened down. And I don't think it's just because of the weather or the elements or how miserable Washington, D.C. is in the summer. It's just, there's just not a lot of enthusiasm for, this militarism that we have going on. Right. I mean, if we are looking at X, there's a big fight, a big fragmentation amongst conservative circles between the right, the pro-Israel right, and the quote woke right, who wants less intervention, less militarism, to not raise the military budget to $1 trillion, which was promised to us that it won't. We would reduce the military budget because it's absolutely bloated and insane. And we're starting to see, like, after the first 100 days of the Trump administration, none of these campaign promises come to fruition. Yeah. And, there's a lot of mental gymnastics going on. There's a lot of propagandists, pro-Trump propagandists trying to spin, all these broken promises about how he wouldn't be an interventionist candidate, how he would lessen our investment in foreign wars and focus more on a Monroe Doctrine 2.0, where we're just going to only focus on the Western Hemisphere in our own neighborhood. And we're just kind of seeing none of that come to fruition. And right now, what we're hearing out of Washington, over the next 48 hours, we're going to get the go, no-go for direct intervention against, in an unprovoked way, against Iran. And if we do that, we'd have even less justification than the 2003 Iraq war. And, this time, the mask is off. We won't even go in front of the United States Security Council with Colin Powell lying about yellow cake. And, we won't even have to gin up consent within Congress. It'll just be a unilateral action from the White House. So I think a lot of people are just, the enthusiasm's not there. I don't think anybody in the military that I've talked to really wants to go to war with Iran. They don't really understand it. At least the consent was manufactured for the invasion of Iraq. But we don't have that now. And right. we're seeing all the politicians like Ted Cruz go on Tucker Carlson, basically demonstrate that he has no knowledge of the country that, they're clamoring to invade. And, Ted Cruz was a really good debater back in the day. And if he had an argument, he would have given it. But it just wasn't there. So everyone's just kind of wondering, what the hell are we doing? And I think that's kind of being reflected within some ranks of the military. And breaking today, a really prominent colonel within the Joint Chiefs of Staff was relieved of duties for posting that Israel was a death cult and we are acting as Israel's proxy in this war. And, it's pretty extreme for a high-ranking field-grade officer to post something like that on X, knowing that he'd probably get relieved, because, you're not really supposed to have political opinions when you're in the military. But that's pretty endemic of the fragmentation and the factions that exist within this administration, both on the military and the civilian side.
So the people that you're talking to who are inside the military, I mean, are there people you're talking to that are like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go to war with Iran. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
Well, first of all, you're always going to get that. I was walking around doing interviews with people at the military parade here. One guy I talked to was a private. He just enlisted. He was 18 years old. I was like, so what does America first mean to you? He's like, America. It means America first. And I was like, okay, but what does that mean to you? It means America first, baby. You're always going to have those kind of people in the military. Like, are those the command echelon, or are they, the rank and file? I definitely think that after 20 years, like, most of the command echelon fought the unfortunately named global war on terror and saw how pointless and destructive it was. And people who I've been speaking to basically see this as another iteration of that. There's no real viable strategy for how to control Iran, even if we're able to implement a regime change. It's 5 times the size of Iraq. The terrain is way more challenging. It's mostly mountainous, would be a hellish field for counterinsurgency operations. It has a large, porous, unsecurable border that weapons and foreign aid and intelligence could flow into. So, like, what are we going to do? Just bomb a few nuclear sites? Implement a regime change? The Jerusalem Post editorial board put out an editorial today saying that they are asking President Trump to partition Iran, to balkanize it like Syria. But, there's really no plan right now. And I think a lot of people are struggling to kind of come up with, like, what is the end game? We went into Iraq with no end game. Went into Afghanistan with no end game. And no one is able to articulate what the end game is with Iran beyond they can't have nukes. And according to our own Director of National Intelligence, this past March at the Global Threat Assessment in front of the Senate, said, there's no credible intelligence that Iran intends to implement to seek a nuclear weapon. And even if they did, they don't even have a delivery system. And, 2003, Ayatollah Khamenei put out a fatwa against it, and the fatwa against nuclear weapons, and he hasn't repealed the fatwa. So it's like, what are we even doing?
Yeah. Or we're going to replace him with somebody who doesn't have that. and then that guy is going to be even more radical, right? And he's definitely going to be looking to develop a nuke. I mean, that's the thing. When they think about regime change, that only works, which it doesn't work, but it theoretically would only work if you could actually put in the person that you want to put in that regime change. But you can't really fully control that. You think you could control that, but you can't actually fully control that. So you could end up with somebody much more radical in that position, or radicals that crop up inside the country that then overthrow the guy that you put in. So maybe you are successful, but then the people will. I mean, that's what happened last time. That's exactly what happened last time in Iran. We threw out Mossadegh, and the Shah came in, and then the people eventually rose up and overthrew the Shah, and now we have the Ayatollah. So what makes them think that would actually work in the long term again when it didn't work the first time around? Now you've got the thing that I find. Go ahead.
No. Please continue.
Well, one thing I was just going to say, what I find interesting is that you've got all of these. Well, we want to free the Iranian people from this Ayatollah. We got to free them, and yet, what am I seeing all over social media is the Shah. Right? They want the son of the Shah to go back. They want to instill a monarchy back into the place. They're, let's bring back the monarchy to free the Iranian people. I mean, it's just like, okay, you're right. There's no plan. Like, are we freeing them, or are we going to put them under a monarchy?
Right, and I don't think the people of Iran, as diverse and pluralistic as they are, I mean, of course, like any other country, they're not a monolith. There's a lot of, like, ethnic and religious distinctions that, of course, the CIA, Mossad, and Gulf intelligence services are always trying to, foment, right? But there's no indication that the Iranian people as a whole will accept another Zionist, fascist, police state monarch. If he's anything like his grandfather, that's what it would be. Right. The Capac was infamous for, their like terrorist tactics as well. So nobody wants to go back to that. So right now, what we're thinking is a Syria 2.0. Bomb it, stoke racial, ethnic, religious tensions, arm different militant groups, and hopefully it gets partitioned and balkanized into smaller little territorial fiefdoms that we can control and influence, so than a unified anti-imperialist government.
Okay, but when you talk to the rank and file that are serving in the military right now, I mean, we're seeing these guys in the parade kind of marching lackadaisically, and maybe that was just because they didn't want to be part of a parade, or maybe it is that they're thinking, wow, we're about to be sent to our deaths in a war that really has nothing to do with keeping America safe. I mean, in the rank and file in the military, are you hearing like, I don't want to go to this war, I don't want to die for this war, I don't want to be involved in it? Or are you hearing, yeah, let's go to war, let's do it, I want to fight in a war?
I'll be honest, that sentiment does exist. When I came out of high school and I enlisted, under a Ranger contract, it was because, it was my family's military tradition. And I didn't want to, I thought this would be the last war that we're going to fight for a while. And it was a rite of passage. And I really didn't care about the politics, as bad as that sounds. That's not an uncommon story.
Okay.
Right. But it's not just the intervention in Iran that people don't understand. Right. It's also National Guard in LA being deployed to police their own citizens to run cover for ICE, and also sending an entire Marine infantry battalion to do what? Secure federal buildings and property. That's not what a lot of guys signed up for. Mike Preisner, he's a producer. He's also an anti-war veteran. And he's a producer of the Empire Files. Basically monitors nonprofits that handle like conscientious objector status and applications, because there's actually a lot of different ways you can legally get out of your military contract with little to no consequences. Mm-hmm. And apparently, like, there has been an unprecedented number of people like asking about, like, how do I end my contract? How do I, file as a conscientious objector if we go to war with Iran? Of course, this will always be a small minority, but it's higher than probably we've and it's hard to judge statistics, but of course the traffic is higher than what we've seen in the past 10 years. So it's kind of hard to get a pulse, because it's the U.S. military is the largest organization in human history, the entire defense apparatus. So you're going to have different factions, different ideas and ideologies all mixed in and competing with each other. But I would say that one saving grace right now is the consent required for another intervention just isn't there in the public's face. Right.
The public definitely doesn't want another war like this. I'm sure, I guess you make good points. If somebody's signing up for the military, yeah, they don't want to go and guard federal buildings. They sign up because I would imagine they think that at some point they might see combat. Like, that might be something, that's what you're training for. That's what you maybe kind of, is hope the right word, do you think? Is hope, like, you kind of hope for combat, I suppose?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay. Right. So that makes sense to me.
Well,
if you're going to sign up for that job, you want to go do that job, right?
Well, yeah, and when you're a confused 20-year-old, everyone's the protagonist of their own little story, so they all think they're going to star in their own little Black Hawk Down. But so yeah, that's a real thing. So a lot of people don't care; they're excited about the prospect of who knows what, being the star of their own movie. But of course, what's interesting now is the Trump administration itself. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, was brought on to his campaign ticket because she was the anti-interventionist, candidate for the ODNI. Now what we're saying, like, after her global threats assessment, which she just reiterated last week when the hostilities with Iran and Israel started to heat up and become hot, she's like isolated politically now. When you look at the Trump administration, personalities reflect policies. So if people are getting like isolated for a certain view, a lot of other officials within the administration will kind of start to toe the line in order to maintain whatever political clout they have in the administration. So slowly, all of these people who used to be like Iran, I wouldn't say doves, but like America first, no more intervention, are starting to kind of toe the line, and I'm very concerned because it's starting to see like the administration is hardening itself within the next like 48 hours to give a no go on whether to drop massive ordnance penetrators on Iranian nuclear sites.
Yeah, and you bring up
which
would go ahead.
Which would necessitate retaliation on U.S. bases, which have a lot less sophisticated air defense layered network systems than Israeli cities and towns.
Right. And that is what the Iranian government has been saying is, look, if you attack us, we're going after your U.S. bases, and they're a lot closer and a lot easier to penetrate than Israel. So you would have potentially troops dying on U.S. bases. Do you think that
I
that's...
think it's pretty much unavoidable.
Sorry?
It's unavoidable.
Unavoidable.
It's unavoidable. Yeah. That would happen. So we don't really know. We can't really judge the Iranian stockpiles. I know last night one of their main manufacturing plants for a lot of their intermediate ballistic missiles was hit and destroyed. So their capacity to reproduce them has been degraded, but like we still can't measure what their actual stockpiles are. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. There's a it's a distance conflict between Iran and Israel right now. And they're both playing a game of bricksmanship about how much of their munitions do they want to use. Iran, its ballistic missile stockpiles, and for the United States and Israel, it's the interceptors for the THAAD batteries, the Arrow 2, David Sling, Iron Dome. Those interceptors have been running low for a long time, and they're actually letting some Iranian ballistic missiles through because they just don't have enough interceptors to cover it. So it's kind of like a race to see whose stockpile is going to end first. And so that's why we're kind of seeing like these more restrained strikes. And also, Israel is also dealing with the logistical problem of having to send fighter bombers into Iranian airspace and refuel using U.S. Stratotankers over Syria. It's incredibly expensive operations, super wasteful and inefficient, but that's the only distance capabilities they have on Iran. So it's really interesting to see this aerial distance conflict unfold, but like that's the crux of it. Who is going to run out of stuff first, essentially?
And who do you think that would be?
It's hard to tell. Like a lot of these THAAD systems, we only produce 30 to 50. We only have the industrial capacity to produce like 30 to 50 interceptors a year. Of course, that's going to expand. And like we have to also make the determination, do we want to allocate all these resources to CENTCOM, Central Command, that basically controls Egypt as an area of operations all the way to India through Pakistan and all the way up to Russia? Or do we want to allocate these resources to U.S. Indo-Pac Command? And because, they're concerned about like China moving on Taiwan, and that's where we want our next strategic shift to go. And after like a lot of our stockpiles have been depleted by the constant arming and involvement with Ukraine, and now do we want another distance conflict here in West Asia when we're trying to shift towards China and deterring China with our porcupine strategy over Taiwan? And Taiwan will need a lot of interceptors if, a conflict arises. So there's a lot of scrambling to figure out exactly where we want to position logistical assets as well. We don't have an unlimited supply of things, and there is definitely people within these defense circles who are like, we actually can't manage this. We don't have enough resources to do that. We are one of the big reasons that people are so frustrated over the global war on terror was because it degraded our high intensity conflict industrial base to all of these like low intensity conflict, like counterinsurgency research and development projects, that basically didn't really focus on pumping out like artillery shells and bombs and interceptors. So we're still trying to scramble and figure that out. But there's just a lot of problems. Like we could talk for hours about all the different problems with this Iran operation, but that's the main thing.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, especially with yesterday when I woke up to Russia having pummeled Kiev, and it was just a reminder of, oh, yeah, and there's that war too, right? I mean, yeah. And we have to send a bunch of, we've been sending tons of weapons to Ukraine, trying to support Ukraine in this fight. Now we're debating, we're supporting Israel, but we're debating even actually getting into that hot war. And then if I were China, I mean, right now would be like an opportune time to say, all right, well, you guys are pretty occupied. So I'm going to go and do what I want to do, knowing that, what are you going to do about it? I mean, what are you going to do about it if we decide, okay, now's the time we're actually just going to take Taiwan and we're going to, that this is just going to be it? I mean, what do you think the chances are? This just seems like, because the United States is against everybody, right? We cannot do that. We can't actually be against everybody. There's just no way. We don't have the ability to do that. So it seems like it would be an opportune time for other nations to jump in on this. And it would be, I suppose, a world war. I mean, this is how you get a world war, right? There would be this kind of world war opportunity, even though they're not none of the enemies, quote unquote enemies, are fighting with each other, but they're all fighting against us. I mean, it seems like it would be an opportune time to do that.
Yeah, one of the issues, though, a lot of people, I get asked all the time on my own platforms, like, why isn't China doing more? Why isn't Russia doing more? Trying to isolate Iran as it's building this security and civil relationship with both Russia and China now at an unprecedented scale. Of course, Iran, with its position along the traditional Silk Road, is really important to China's Belt and Road Initiative, its global infrastructure plan. Also, China's getting a lot of oil from Iran right now. That's one of the ways China's helping out the Iranian economy, which is languishing under U.S. sanctions. But you have to. I got some heat last year when people started talking about BRICS. BRICS is the big multipolar challenge to American imperium, but it's so rife with its own contradictions too. It's not like this united anti-imperialist front as some people like to imagine, who long for the end of the U.S. empire and for us to be just another normal country that takes care of its own people. But no, it's too rife with its own contradictions. Brazil, that government is totally captured by Western interests. India and China hate each other. They're still trying to find ways to needle and come into conflict, and there's just not really a unifying principle. And you would think that after what the United States recently did by supporting this genocide in Palestine, by the investment in Syria, and the sanctioning of the other countries in the Sahel and sub-Saharan Africa that are putting up this front against the old colonial powers by kicking out the French from Niger and demanding that Agadez Air Force Base is shut down. There's not really this united front that a lot of people expected, and it just hasn't come yet. So I think China is still going to exercise strategic patience, not make a move on Taiwan, because we are literally destroying ourselves with this. And it's going to take a long time. We have a lot of imperial inertia behind us, but all of this is so self-destructive, just like the global war on terror was so self-destructive. And we're behaving in the same way, using the same propaganda talking points, thinking that the only option is force, is violence, and eventually, it's going to come home to roost. So, I don't think China's going to do anything. Yeah.
I'm not saying that they would coordinate and that they would do it for each other's sake, that they would come to each other's rescue, like China would actually go and help Iran out, or Russia would help Iran out. I don't think they would. I'm just saying that now is an opportune time. It's sort of like Israel and Syria. I mean, Syria. Why was it such an opportune time to take out Syria? It was because Russia was occupied. I mean, before, Russia maybe would have done more for Syria, would have helped Syria out more, but Russia was busy with their own war with Ukraine. And so it was an opportune time for Israel to say, oh, okay. It's not like Israel was helping Ukraine or anything like that. It's like they're operating in their own interest, and their own interest is, well, now your protector's weak. And so, you're weak. And so now is an opportune time for me to swoop in and take advantage of the fact that you're basically defenseless at this moment. And so I would look at Taiwan if I were China, and I'd say, you're basically defenseless. The United States is busy, really busy right now. And so they're not coming to your rescue, Taiwan. So here we are. We've now shown up because your protector's preoccupied. So I don't think it would be they band together to help each other out. I'm saying that suddenly a lot of nations around the world might be looking at this as an opportune time to do what it is they want to do for their own interest, because the United States, the big protector, of a lot of these other interests is a bit preoccupied at the moment, especially if we go into war, which makes me think that some of these other countries might even be for it. Go ahead, go to war with Iran. By all means, be totally and completely preoccupied so that we can go and do what we want to do, which is against your interests. Possible.
Yeah, and one interesting thing is, like the massive allocation of another carrier strike group to the Red Sea and Gulf region is absolutely insane. So that fleet's usually tasked for to Indo-PACOM in East Asia, but now that's moving away. So we still believe there's still people in Washington that believe that we have the same power projection that we had in the 90s, but we don't. It's gone. So, I mean, again, this is why I keep saying, hey, attacking Iran, even by just doing an aerial bombing campaign, will have massive military consequences. Our bases will get hit. It'll cause a massive political storm within the home front. And it would be a good time to exploit American, I wouldn't say like necessarily like weakness. You could say that, but distraction. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But will that... So we only have like enough capacity. Like the entire military is actually only designed for one major war and one minor contingency. That's been the model since the post World War II era. So like we can only do so many military interventions, which is why our modus operandi generally has been throughout history regime change and funding, because global power projection requires all these bases, but it's still hard to mobilize massive forces across the globe. And that's one of the issues with this idea of Iran, like especially an invasion. It just wouldn't work. So now we're stuck with this old idea that we've had since the 90s, bomb them into freedom, and hopefully we can get a guy in there that will, be motivated by corporate interests and we can control him through money. So
that does seem to be the strategy. That certainly does seem to be it. That seems to be what they want to do, is make it like Syria. I just think it'd be a lot harder to do because, for one, Iran has not been in civil war for the last 14 years. So, they don't have that problem and a massive refugee crisis of people bleeding out of the country. They don't have those. It's just not ripe in the same way that it was for Syria to topple in the way that it did. I mean, it's just not there. But certainly there just seems to be, and another thing just to bring up, like Russia, why wouldn't Russia go and help Iran? Why would Russia? I mean, Russia at this point, if the U.S. once again is engaged in a battle with Iran, bombing Iran, losing U.S. troops because bases are being hit, Russia now can just do what it did the other day, pummel Kiev and be like, all right, we're taking it. We're taking the whole damn country now, because what are you going to do about it? You guys aren't going to come to the rescue of Ukraine. I mean, you guys are busy. You're a little bit busy over there. It's just, there seems to be it seems like there could be an opportunity for a lot of other countries to show up against the United States interests. So the whole thing is a bad idea, basically.
Well, yeah, and also one salient point that I do want to make, that diplomacy with the U.S. and like good faith diplomacy for everybody is done.
Right.
I think what we saw with this Iran nuclear deal, the U.S. and we did this with Nasrallah too and Hezbollah. The U.S. was basically acting as like intermediaries between like two different combatants and saying like, hey, we want this deal. Hey, Iran, we want this nuclear deal to happen. We're willing to work with you. We're having the 6th round of talks this past Sunday. This is going to happen. And then flashback to last year. Hey, Hezbollah, we're trying to come to a ceasefire negotiation and broker it, between you, the Lebanese government, and Israel. And that was all to give political cover to Israel, lull them into a false sense of confidence, like this deal was going to get done, while kind of buying time to set up and put in place an assassination strike.
Yeah.
And so this is now what U.S. diplomacy has come to. Mm-hmm. Everybody who's in the game realizes that, and our word, after funding a genocide and giving political cover for one for 2 years, almost 2 years now, I think all U.S. soft power is done, and everyone's going to be dealing with the United States, at least in the global South countries, completely as a bad faith actor.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's for sure, entirely. Well, let me just ask you, what do you think the end result will be? So if the U.S. does go into the hot war with Iran and Iran strikes bases, I'm just kind of wondering, what is it going to take for the U.S. to just get run out of the Middle East? For that portion of the world to just say, you're not welcome here. You have all these bases here. You need to go. You guys cause problems everywhere you go. Get out of here. I mean, is there a possibility that this whole thing blows up in our faces and the United States gets run out of the Middle East? I mean, how do you see this ending?
I think our position within the Middle East is pretty secure at the moment. Bear in mind that the United States has massive insurance policies, and so does Israel, with all these comprador, monarchic, dynastic governments within the region. One of the things is we provide them with military supplies and materiel, and taking, military equipment, vehicles, and material from the United States is one of our biggest insurance policies, because, we can sell you tanks, we can sell you aircraft, but what we use as leverage in order to basically make sure these militaries still function and do our bidding is we leverage replacement parts. So we have like the fancy Cadillac stuff that needs a lot of replacement parts, but we control that supply. So if you do something step out of line, like Iran did, which is why they have a fleet of like F-14s and older aircraft. Well, we have them under sanctions where they cannot get from anywhere else in the world specific replacement parts for U.S. aircraft that they still have. So that's one of the ways we leverage governments and their military. Of course, the military bases themselves offer security, with other neighbors. It's kind of like this stabilizing element, because like one country is not going to attack another country if they both have U.S. bases in it. This is the very reductive overall logic about how we have implanted ourselves militarily within the region, but also politically. We have all these business deals with the Saudis. Donald Trump just went to the Gulf states in order to invest in this massive AI buildup within Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Bahrain to challenge the Chinese AI supremacy. So there's business deals, there's military deals, and one of Israel's biggest insurance policies within the region is their high-tech spy and espionage ware that they sell to all governments, even ones that aren't normalized with Israel, like the Saudis. They all use this to spy on their own people, to look for dissent, because there's nothing that these monarchic dynasties fear more than an Arab Spring 2.0. So they use the same kind of stuff that the same technology used to enforce occupation and apartheid on Palestinians on their own people throughout the region. So we're very entrenched. And the only real bastion standing against that entrenchment is Iran. And that's the thinking behind like the neocon hawks instead of diplomacy, because, we want to have an Abraham Accord, a pan-Arab Abraham Accord throughout the region in order to stabilize it, in order to build the IMEC corridor, the Mumbai to Europe trade corridor. There's just so much going on and so many reasons why the U.S., from a entrenched foreign policy perspective, believes that regime change and violence is the only option.
And what do you think?
And of course,
will be
as
the
long as
result?
Israel exists in the way it does,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I think the administration itself doesn't know exactly what it wants to do. Trump was supposed to speak last night to address the nation or the world. Apparently that was coming out of the White House, but that was canceled. I think they're just running different policy situations, and I don't think anybody knows what they're going to do. So Iran's in a difficult position, obviously, very tenuous that can go either way. But what we should focus on here is like, yes, there is a possibility for peace in the region, but the biggest destabilizing element in it is not Iran. It's
Right.
Israel.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, look, I would love to see the Ayatollah go away. I think that a lot of Iranians would like to live without the theocracy ruling their daily lives. I think the majority, in fact, don't want to live under a theocracy, but they also don't want to live in a failed state that looks like Syria, that's been taken over by whoever knows, or a place even worse like Libya, or a place where there's a lot of civil war that has broken out. I know that they don't want that. They certainly don't want a Western puppet. They want to rule their own country. And the problem is, and many of them would like to get rid of the theocracy, but every time there's a chance for them to do it or rising up, they know that the West will swoop in and take that opportunity for their own gain, and they don't like that either. So it's been, tough for the Iranian people, I'm sure, but I don't know how this turns out. I mean, except in a failed state, I suppose. That's what it seems like.
And that's actually what the editorial board for the Jerusalem Post published this morning. They want to partition Iran and balkanize it. And I suggest you guys all look at the article because it's the playbook. We talked about how they wanted to do this 2 months ago.
Yeah.
That's always been the plan because a regime change, probably not tenable. Because it's so pluralistic and multi-ethnic in Iran, what you probably want to go for is balkanization between different groups, all fighting for different territorial fiefdoms. That would break the power. And the last challenge to, U.S. Israeli plans in the region, and it would secure, West Asia for complete normalization with Israel.
Greg Stoker, thank you so much for being here and giving us your analysis. Really appreciate it. I hope that, I don't even know what I hope anymore at this point.
I know it's so exhausting. I'm just basically just trying to hold it together and not just pass out. This news cycle's been so insane.
And just the mental gymnastics that people have to go through in order to make this somehow America first is that's what's appalling to watch. It's really. Really? Like buying Greenland was somehow America first, or taking Canada and making it a state was somehow America first. This is what people voted for. And now going to war with Iran is somehow America first. I'm pretty sure that's not what America first was supposed to be, but here we are anyway, right? Anything but America.
I know you're trying to end, but I would just like to say one thing about that. Everything we're seeing right now is from the 2001 post 9/11 propaganda playbook. So when I joined, I was told that we're fighting in Afghanistan to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them at home. Right. And so we need to destroy Iran's new civilian nuclear program and fight them over there on behalf of Israel, because Israel's doing our dirty work in the region so that we don't have New York City get nuked. It's the same propaganda playbook.
Yeah, it is.
And I think people are exhausted of it by now, at least most reasonable adult.
Surprisingly, though, still a lot are falling for it. And that is the big shocker. I think the biggest shocker of all with this whole thing. Greg, thank you again for being here. We do have the links down below to follow you on X, also to your podcast, Colonial Outcast. I definitely recommend people pay attention to it, especially now as things are ramping up. So, Greg, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.